Good morning again to the Honourable House. Good morning to Honourable Minister of Energy. Good morning to the team from the Ministry of Energy and Business Development.
Mr. Chairman, Head 92, Ministry of Energy and Business Development, in the amount of $65,290,934.
Thank you. Before we begin examination of this head today, let me, for the benefit of our guests from the Ministry of Energy, as was done for all other heads, we will give direction with respect to how these sessions are conducted. The Honourable Minister has 10 minutes to give her opening remarks and overview of the ministry. The Honourable Leader of the Opposition is given equal time for his opening remarks. The Honourable Minister, before you begin your presentation, you would introduce the team with you. Members of this Honourable Chamber will each have opportunity to ask questions, and when you ask your question, you have the opportunity for 3 supplementary questions pertaining to that particular question. I want officers of the ministry, before you begin to speak, you introduce yourselves, give your name and the office you hold within this ministry for the record, for Hansard records. I trust that we are clear. Let us begin. Honourable Minister, we give you opening remarks.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and good morning to the Honourable Chamber. I want to begin by, of course, introducing my team. We represent the Ministry of Energy and Business, and so today we will be covering both of those portfolios, and the team here is reflective of the Energy division of the ministry, the Business division, as well as the commercial state-owned enterprises and the statutory entities that constitute the ministry. On that basis, the persons represented here and on the environs of the Parliament buildings to support today's exercise are as follows. To my left, with me is Permanent Secretary in the Ministry of Energy and Business, Mr. Kevin Hunt. Also here is Ms. Natalie Cox, Deputy Permanent Secretary with responsibility for administration. To my immediate right, the officer in charge of the newly created Business Barbados and the Registrar of the Corporate Registry. We also have our Financial Controller, Mr. Mark Knight, and Accountant, Ms. Juanita Knight. Our Director of Natural Resources, Mr. Jamar White. The Project Management Unit are representing the Department of Renewable Energy, Mr. Delano Scanterbury. The Project Manager for the Project Execution Unit of the Smart Fund, Ms. Rosalind Griffith. The CEO of the Barbados National Oil Company, Mr. James Brown, and representing the National Petroleum Corporation, Mr. Ian Bradshaw. The Chairman of the Fair Trading Commission, Ms. Tammy Bryan, is with us, along with a team from the FTC, including Ms. Dava Leslie Ward, who is the officer in charge, the Director of Utilities and Regulation, Mr. Brian Reese, and we also have Dr. Troy Waterman with the team. From the Department of Commerce and Consumer Affairs, we have Director Mr. Bertram Johnson. From the Small Business Development Unit, Mr. Anderson Cumberbatch. The Director of International Business, Mrs. Sanjeev Watkins-Diane. The Chief Economist, Ms. Katrina Bradshaw. The Director of Co-ops, Mr. Brent Gittins, and also the representatives of Fund Access and Trust Loans, Mr. Jerry Amos, the CEO of Trust Loans, and Ms. Esther Lord Graham, the General Manager of Fund Access. And we also have the project manager for the electronic single window, which falls under this ministry, Ms. Lana Chandler. These are the representatives of the Ministry of Energy and Business, and they are representatives, but they are not the entirety of the Ministry of Business. And I want to begin my comments today by expressing my appreciation both to those who are here in Parliament and those that are undertaking the ongoing work of the ministry elsewhere for the work that they have put in, certainly over the last year, and the work that is projected to be undertaken in the coming year. This is a small ministry, and you can see that based on the estimates of expenditure relative to other ministries, it is a smaller sum which is allocated to the ministry. But that is the reason for that, Mr. Chairman, is really because we're meant to unlock economic activity as part of the productive sectors. And so the expenditure in this ministry may be lower, but the revenue that it generates in the economy is meant to be higher than perhaps in other sectors. I want now to shift my attention to the primary things that the ministry is going to be speaking about today, and of course going to be in a position to respond to. First, I'm going to deal with the ministry's energy division. Mr. President, this has without doubt been perhaps one of the more challenging sections of the ministry, but not in a negative way, in an extremely positive way. In 2016, Mr. President, the earliest licenses for renewable energy were granted, 2016. In 2019, we developed a national energy policy. That national energy policy, Mr. Chairman, extends out to 2030. It is a long runway, it is an extensive runway, and it covers everything from renewable energy, energy efficiency, energy mobility, and it looks at the overall sectors within the productive economy to be able to identify, Chairman, how Barbados will implement over the years from 2019 through 2030 a national energy policy. In the last year, we have undertaken to get into the details, we call it getting into the weeds, of the implementation of the latest incarnation of the Barbados National Energy Policy. That has included a significant body of work on the legislative side, and in the last year, we would have seen pass through this House and the other place a new piece of legislation that did for energy that which was done in 2017 for telecoms, the passage of the Electricity Supply Act. That provides a new regulatory framework that goes hand in hand with existing legislation governing the energy sector. Practically, also, there have also been the development of additional supplementary studies to support the implementation of the National Energy Policy. I will get into that during the course of today's presentation. We have also, since 2019, had the implementation of new structures. Amendments were made to the Utilities Regulation Act in the 2023 period, and we now have all of the regulatory arrangements being finalized for the implementation of the Electricity Act, Supply Act, which was proclaimed on March 1st of this year. Mr. President, in the last year, we have completed also the development of, and I'm going to list some of the bodies of work here, a grid characterization study, which for the first time in the country maps the entire grid from St. Lucie to St. Philip and everything in between. So we now are in a position to identify where Barbados's grid needs to be upgraded. We have also seen the completion of a grid modernization plan. That has been completed. We have completed during the last financial year the update of the 2021 Integrated Resource and Resilience Plan. That has been redone and completed in 2024. We have also completed in 2024 an Energy Transition Investment Plan that maps out through 2030 and beyond what level of investment will be required on an annual basis by sector to implement the energy transition that is captured in the National Energy Plan. In the Fair Trading Commission that is here, Mr. President, Mr. Chairman, you will see also that there is a significant body of work that is expected. There is an increase in these estimates of expenditure for the Fair Trading Commission so that they're able to implement a lot of the capacity building work that is necessary. One of the things we're also quite proud of that has been completed during this financial year, Mr. Chairman, has been the launch of Business Barbados. Certainly in this place and in the other place, there has been an extensive discussion around the challenges that the country has faced on the business side as it relates to the ease or perhaps not ease of doing business in the country. And that is a fact from which I have never stepped back. It is a reality that has confronted every single government for perhaps 30 years. And so we have seen it as a problem. We have taken the commitment to fix it. And we were very pleased to launch on February 1st, Business Barbados, which takes a national, all-of-country, customer-focused approach to doing business and addressing the challenges of ease of doing business in the country. We've also, Mr. President, been very proud in this last year as well of the continued rollout and the expansion of the financial literacy program. We are pleased, Mr. Chair, to share that we started with a limited number, a single-digit number of schools which had been onboarded, especially in the youth space, to address the rollout of the financial literacy program. Effective September of this year, we will have 55 schools onboarded with a financial literacy program. By next year, the expectation is that all secondary and all primary schools will be onboarded, and I am pleased to share as well that during this financial year, we have onboarded all of our special needs schools as well, and we have completed the publication of brochures and workbooks for each school, which have primary education, tertiary education, and special needs education workbooks provided for the people of this country, for the young people of the country. That work has been completed and will be continued over the course of this year and is accounted for in the estimates. Equally so, the community-based program will be rolled out. And on the energy side, because we are a coherent ministry, we launched for the first time this financial year an energy summer camp in schools which benefited over 200 schools, 200 students enrolled in the National Summer Camp program. And the expectation is that in this upcoming financial year, allocated in our estimates, we will have an even broader rollout of the program. Mr. Chairman, I see you indicating that my time is coming, and so I have every confidence that as I close with
I'm giving you a minute to close up.
As I close with a high-level overview of the work that the ministry has undertaken, I want very much to just take a few seconds to say to the Honourable Chamber that there are a number of hot pressing issues that we are going to be dealing with today, and I hope to have the opportunity to speak to them. The provision of battery energy storage systems for the country, that is one of the issues that we have done a considerable amount of work on so far this year, and I want to take the opportunity during this year. We are on the cusp of launching the long talked about Lambert's Wind Farm, Barbados' first major wind farm, and as we speak, the International Financial Corporation is on the ground, and I offer apologies from members of my team who are participating in the finalization of that work with that mission. So, Mr. President, we have a lot that we want to share with the Honourable Chamber today, and I want to thank an incredible team. It is a small team. We literally have a limited number of officers in the ministry. They have worked day and night together with the business team as well to be able to deliver results for the people of Barbados and on behalf of the government. And I am incredibly proud to lead this exceptional, even if small team. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and I beg to move that Head 92 stand part.
Therefore beg to move, Mr. Chairman, that Head 92 stand part.
Thank you, Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman of Committees, and good morning Minister, and good morning to the members of your team. Maybe it is logical that energy, the portfolios of energy and business development should go together. And I describe that as an interesting marriage. Since no marriage is perfect, we probably would not describe it as the perfect marriage, but it is, I think, logical that energy and business development should exist in the same house. It is interesting because in a modern post-industrial world, and by that I mean post-industrial revolution, not post-industrial. In the Western post-industrial revolution world, energy is no longer about feeding the horse. Energy is about access to fossil fuels, and we know what comes next. And that is expensive. Energy in this post-industrial revolution world is now far more expensive than it used to be. Indeed, it is a major cost. And I did say that there is a marriage between, a logical marriage, a logical union between energy and business development, so that this ministry finds itself mediating those two partners, energy and business. And therefore, the imperative is that of controlling the costs of energy. Unless you control the cost of energy, it will adversely affect businesses. And of course, if we don't control the cost of energy, we do not also control prices. And if we do not control prices, we affect demand for those products. And when, as we all know, when demand is down, the economy contracts. And I know lots of economists focus on growth as a critical factor within economic development. And so where you have unsatisfactory growth, you have an economy that maybe, I say maybe, underperforming, and therefore an entire country suffers as a result. All of that is to say how important is energy within a modern economy. And as I've said, the cost of that energy. And we all know where I'm going here. We all know that I am about to say that government has a very heavy responsibility in controlling the cost of that energy. Now, we know that a few years ago, the Fair Trading Commission was established as a quasi-judicial body to control pricing by our utilities. And of course, in this event, the major focus has tended to be on light and power, as opposed to the telephone and water people. And that is where most of the focus, most of the attention has been. And it is like that not because it is glamorous, but it is like that because it is critical to people's survival, commercially and within homes, commercially and domestically, the cost of energy. And so you have this relationship, this almost a three-way relationship, because as an agency of state, fair trading is then given the authority to determine prices. And it allows the government whether for good or for bad, to withdraw from active participation in pricing, and that responsibility goes to this entity called a Fair Trading Commission. I'm not addressing the converts in this chamber. Everyone here knows what I'm talking about, but sometimes we need, as parliamentarians, to educate our public. And I think that is my limited role here today, that the government may say to the public, look, it is the Fair Trading Commission that regulates that important aspect of pricing within the distribution of energy. But government has a role to play. While the Fair Trading gives rulings as to pricing, government maintains an active role as a policymaker. And I say to this minister and to this government that government must now, at this critical stage of development, exercise its influence and to formulate policy that will not inflict itself on light and power, but will affect light and power. And government must understand that it is trustee for the interests of the people. And if the people for 1 second begin to believe that government is protecting the interests of Barbados Light and Power, then the people will lose faith and confidence in the government in spite of the existence of the Fair Trading Commission. I've said all of that to say that we have come into the era of alternative energy, where we are moving away from fossil fuels, and the sun shines on Barbados in excess of 350 days out of the 365 per annum. And it is free. To all intents and purposes, it's free. The cost comes in capturing that energy. And I want to say that the people of Barbados must now be extremely disappointed that after the promises of the government about this magical year 2030, that too many Barbadians are now being deprived of access through solar energy, through the intended purchase of photovoltaic systems. Too many Barbadians feel that they are deprived of access to that four-letter word, and it is a pleasant four-letter word, the grid. Too many of us do not have access to the grid. And they will say that there may be corporate and private individuals who enjoy the privilege of access. And that is not a satisfactory state of affairs. The rain falls on the just and the unjust, and so does the sunshine on the rich and the poor, and their roofs. And so this government must now be encouraged to move closer by its policy to a situation in which every citizen, every house top, every roof in this country can have a photovoltaic system and can have cheaper energy. And I say that is domestic and corporate. We heard an honourable minister in here yesterday lamenting that one of his favorite projects is yet unable to gain access to the grid, and that they have been unable to install those photovoltaic systems. And that is evidence, Minister, as to the state of things in this country. I don't say the state of play. This is not about play. This is serious business. This is people's opportunity to lower their bills. This is people's opportunity to be able to spend the thousands of dollars that they spend yearly on electricity, and to spend far less on electricity and to spend far more on their children's books and their food. The cost of energy, the price of energy, beyond cost, the price of energy in this country is horrendously high. And all the responsibility must not be placed on a Fair Trading Commission. As I've said before, the Fair Trading Commission is a regulatory body. The government is a body that creates policy. And the people of this country are requesting of this government a more aggressive policy towards cheaper electricity prices. I will say more on that. Your Honor, I don't know if I've exceeded my time, but you're so kind, you normally give me an extra minute, and I will take it and go to international business, which we can describe that as the quiet sector, and this ministry presides over the prospects of international business. I said it is quiet because most Barbadians don't understand the large contribution that the international business sector makes towards the treasury of this country. Those details will come later. But let us continue not only to protect that sector, but to promote that sector. I was here for the debate on the Business Barbados legislation. I had my deep concerns. I continue to have my deep concerns, except though that Foreign Affairs, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs may wish to busy itself in terms of, I'm a little curious. Well, let me complete the sentence. The Ministry of Foreign Affairs may need to busy itself in terms of its activity in attracting more international business to this country. But if we are to stay competitive, and it appears that we are not quite as competitive as we need to be. And Your Honor, I see you pulling the microphone, so I will say those are my submissions, and I will express deepest gratitude to you for the additional 30 seconds that you gave me. I'm obliged to you, sir.
Thank you, Honourable Leader of the Opposition. We now move to the Honourable Members. Honourable Member for Christchurch West Central.
Thank you, Chair, and welcome, Minister, and your staff. I will go straight to questions. We as a country, we have said that to our people and to the rest of the world, that by 2035, the least, we will transition in such a way, with your ministry leading the charge, to a fossil fuel free or as carbon neutral as possible country. Minister, we know full well that the energy sector produces about 80% of the total carbon dioxide as a greenhouse gas that is produced as part of our NDC report, 1.6 million tons or so. We know that the rest is produced by agriculture, landfill, natural processes by animal behavior, humankind. But, Minister, I know that you would have done a series of things in your ministry and put systems in place so that we can transition by the year 2035 to have Barbados as fossil-free as possible, recognizing, of course, that the world over has said that this is the way how we will be able to mitigate and combat the vagaries associated with our climate change crisis. So you can tell us what your ministry is doing and how much success you have been having so far. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair, for allowing me the opportunity to provide a response. Now, in 2023, we started the process, Mr. Chairman, with the Sustainable Energy for All entity, which is led by the Assistant Secretary General for the Special Advisor to the UN Secretary General for Energy. And interestingly, next week here in Barbados, we presently have close to 1,000 people from around the world coming to Barbados to be able to participate in the Sustainable Energy for All Global Forum and to culminate the work that they have been doing with us since 2023. We have simulated, as was asked by the Honourable Member just now, what it would cost, and it dovetails with the points just raised by the Honourable Leader of the Opposition. We've simulated if Barbados were to continue on its current trajectory, what we call a business as usual scenario. What would be the cost to the country? How will it impact the country in all of its sectors? If we were to push the implementation of a phase out of fossil fuels by 2030, what would that cost the country? And sector by sector, what would need to happen? We've simulated that as well for 2035. So in this ministry, we can tell you what it would cost either if we stay and do nothing, if we phase out by 2030, and if we phase out by 2035. We can tell you that the largest consumption of energy, specifically in terms of the fossil fuels and the transition to renewable energy, will come from transportation as the largest sector. And it is the reason why under this ministry, you will see that the financing arrangements for the electric buses has been facilitated to allow for that to take place. Buildings, residential and commercial, we have an extensive program to retrofit government buildings already that has been executed under the Smart Fund 2 program. And I want to be able to recognize for a moment someone I forgot to mention earlier, Ms. Claire Best, who is the person who was led and anchored on the Energy Transition Investment Plan, the industry sector, and then followed by the agriculture sector. Those are the hardest to abate sectors, and all of those sectors are accounted for in the simulations for business as usual, 2030 and 2035. We've also looked at the fuel import bill. In 2024, Mr. Chairman, we saw close to $1 billion of imports in fossil fuels. If we were to remove that $1 billion of imports in fossil fuels, Mr. Chairman, save that foreign exchange, and to capture the renewable energy sources from the sun, the wind, we would then be able to reallocate those resources to other social purposes in the country and to be able to benefit Barbadians not just by the lowering of electricity costs, but by government's expenditure being reallocated to social service sectors. And so there is a compelling reason to be made in every which way we look at it for Barbados to make the transition that the Honourable Member asked about and the Honourable Leader of Opposition spoke about, and to be able to do so in a systematic way that is phased and scalable. Now, as I close, I know I just have limited time to answer that particular question. I just want to also point out that we've also simulated what we call the last mile. The last mile of anything always is the hardest.
Honorable Minister, I don't recall saying it, but you do have 5 minutes to answer your questions, not the 3 minutes, as is the case with the officers, but you have 5 minutes to answer.
Okay, so I wanted to be able to introduce that we have also simulated not just the investment needs, but the socio-economic needs, people. A central part of our energy transition investment plan and the transition to green sources of power overall is what we call a just transition. How do people factor into this mix? And so this is a government that has launched the Homeowners' Right to Renewable Energy program. And we currently have individual homeowners who have indicated an interest in having access to renewable energy incorporated into the overall commercial and residential mix for this transition. So there is no exclusion at all for this government, for people. And so I want to pause here for a moment and invite Ms. Claire Best, who has anchored the work on the energy transition plan, to be able to share a little bit more on where we are going in terms of the transition as was raised by the Honourable Member.
Thank you, Minister. Yes, Honorable Chamber, oh, yes, me. I am Claire Best, Chief Project Analyst in the Research and Planning Unit at the Ministry of Energy and Business in the Energy Division. As Minister indicated, we just completed, I am so proud of it, an energy transition and investment plan, which we will shortly be laying before the Cabinet. It is the culmination of 2 years of work. It was a gargantuan effort. We did capture, Honourable Minister, the sectors that you are as you are saying, you are having concerns with in terms of the emissions. I do represent the division also on your NDC committee. This is the third iteration of that. I also enjoy that very much. But we did capture a model for power, for industry, agriculture, transport, and the socioeconomic factors that are going to affect our transition. So we are on the trajectory right now where we have the options in our energy mix to determine how we see that future and how we see that NZE, net zero emission transition, playing out. We have benefited in the ministry from training. We've had 3 of our senior officers in the ministry change because this model, and this is one of the reasons why I love it, this model is flexible. So we have the ability to go in at the back end and adjust the variables and the scenarios that we have for our NZE transition. And we also included an officer who was with us but has gone on to the fiscal risk unit to benefit from that training as well. So it's interministerial. And for that reason, it levels itself at a strategic point over the other existing works and consultancies going on in the ministry and in our sister ministries, and it allows us then to be realistic in our future projections.
Following on to that, Minister, in order for us to be successful, and I agree with everything that you said thus far, you're an officer, but there must be access to abatement technology. At our last 2 calls, we said that the world must have a face down of fossil fuel, but the only way we can have a successful face down of fossil fuel, recognizing the harmful effects of the greenhouse gas produced from its use, is if there is access to abatement technology. We know that battery storage and battery access is a concern the world over. And the new batteries that would be really allow us to transition the lithium iron phosphate, the lithium ion batteries, that those batteries are being grabbed by everyone in the international arena. I want to know what your ministry is doing to ensure that we have the battery storage capacity when we are fully transitioning into the renewables energy sector. Thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Member. Mr. Chairman, I thank you for the question. So let me deal with the abatement question first. We have had a discussion over the last 2 years with a number of international partners on the commercialization of various abatement technologies as it relates to fossil fuel generation. To date, we have not seen the level of commercialization of abatement technologies that we would necessarily like to see, but it remains on the agenda for the ministry and certainly for the international community where a lot of the R&D and innovation is taking place. Now, on battery energy storage systems, Mr. Chairman, last year, I believe we heard that Barbados was moving towards competitive procurement for battery energy storage systems. I want to take the opportunity now in the 5 minutes that I have to give an update on where we are, and I'm going to invite Mr. Delano Scanterbury as well, so if he can begin to make his way, if he's not there already, into the well to follow on. Mr. Chairman, in our initial legislation, in our existing legislation, I should say, prior to the Electricity Supply Act, there was no provision in any of our regulatory or legislative arrangements for storage to be brought onto the grid in the same way that we are proposing to have it done now because of the challenges of access to the grid and the grid being locked. We currently have 107 megawatts on average on the grid. The grid really ought to carry only 100 megawatts. And so that is a mix. Our grid initially was made for fossil fuels. It has been adapted over the last few years to allow for the blending of fossil fuels and renewables, specifically solar PV. But solar PV is intermittent. 4 hours peak during the daytime, and that's what you're going to get out of solar PV, and so it does require battery energy storage systems. The utility has indicated, and one of the bodies of work that was completed during this year was an energy storage framework for batteries. We now have that approved, and it has been issued by the Fair Trading Commission, following inputs from agencies including GEED and others. We now have a framework guiding the technical specifications for batteries for the country. That did not exist before. That has been completed. We've also, I mentioned the grid characterization study. We've done that on the transmission lines. So now we know that the first battery energy storage system projects will be on the transmission lines in the country, and the second phase will be on the distribution lines. And we know that by having mapped out the grid. We have a grid modernization plan that is underway that does also include batteries. The honorable member spoke about the different types of technologies. Currently, our Integrated Resource and Resilience Plan of 2021 and 2024 allows for a specific type of technology for the same reason that we have not yet used abatement technologies. They're all not yet commercialized, and not yet widely commercialized, I should say. And so our Integrated Resource and Resilience Plan allows for lithium-ion batteries specifically to be used 4 hours or 4-hour equivalent batteries. That is what is proposed for Barbados. And so where are we now specifically? We have completed almost all of the development work, and there are just 3 elements which are remaining, and we expect that having done the work, that within a matter of weeks, we will launch Barbados's first battery energy storage system procurement, and we will have that in the market. In addition, the Fair Trading Commission, which is here, and I'm going to ask them to speak in a little bit. The Fair Trading Commission has also completed their public consultation on the launch of an energy storage tariff regime. That will allow for persons who want to have their own battery systems and who have solar PV to also make an application for battery energy for their own energy storage systems. And so there will be at least 2 pathways being implemented in parallel, large systems, smaller systems, so that Barbadians and the Barbadian community, business and residential customers, can have access to battery energy storage systems. But I'm going to ask Mr. Delano Scanterbury, who along with Ms. Destiny Gay and the Director of Renewable Energy, Mr. Brian Haynes, have been leading on this work. And this is new for all of them. Barbados is doing this first, and I really want to celebrate this small team. Delano?
Good morning. Thank you, Minister. My name is Delano Scanterbury. I am the project director in the project monitoring and coordination team. As Minister said, we have engaged on a competitive procurement in regard to 60 megawatts of battery energy storage systems. We would have launched a request for information that would have taken place in November of 2024, and we would have seen around 69 entities would have downloaded the documents. We would have received from approximately 11 companies, some 39 projects that have a capacity of 404 megawatts of battery energy storage. We are now in the final stages, as Minister would have said, of dealing with the request for proposals. Only last week, we would have had a 5-day workshop with RELP, who are our transaction advisors. They are the Global Renewable Energy Mass Adoption Program, and their assistance is provided free of charge to the government. In that regard, we would have met with all the main stakeholders, and we would have been tying up the request for proposals, which we expect to be launched sometime at the end of this month or early in April. To that end, we then expect that we would have the bids that would come in, and we would be looking at developing and coming to an evaluation of that. But during the course of the last year, we would have seen the development of a grid characterization study, which was critical to determining where on the grid we would require interconnection of battery energy storage that will be utilized by the prospective bidders to determine where their projects go, as this will not be site-specific. To that end, we would like to see, obviously, the stabilization of the grid. We believe that the energy storage tariff would assist greatly in that endeavor, and I'm certain the FTC could speak more to that. But we are progressing, and we hope to have battery energy storage on the grid as soon as possible. Thank you.
Thank you, Delano. Mr. Brian Reese from the Fair Trading Commission, please, on the ESD.
Good morning, everyone. Chairman, and Minister and all, thanks for the opportunity to speak on this matter. Specifically, as far as the EST is concerned, the EST augments the opportunities for Barbados to establish and implement battery energy storage on the grid. As the Minister has very adequately explained, the need for battery energy storage.
Excuse me.
I'm sorry,
Officer,
my
you-
apologies. I am Brian Rees, the Director of Utilities Regulation with the Fair Trading Commission.
Thank
My
you.
apologies. As I was saying, the implementation of the battery energy storage systems through the energy storage tariff will augment the competitive procurement auction that is being implemented very shortly, as the Minister mentioned. It assists the grid in terms of the addition of the variable renewable energy onto the grid, because as was mentioned before, the grid was really designed for a more historic, more fossil fuel-based system. As we advance with variable renewable energy, the grid needs to be able to not only access the input from those VREs, the variable renewable energy systems, but be able to store it at times when they're no longer available. The beauty of the EST, though, is that it then allows the smaller participants to be able to implement systems at a level below the utility scale battery energy storage systems. A bit of history is that the energy storage tariff framework was established in 2023. We did have consideration from the prospective installers that they wished for us to consider how the compensation package was rolled out. We have taken that on board. We, as was promised within the EST, conducted the review inclusive of public participation through a consultation, and we're now in the process of determining what will be the revised energy storage tariff for up to 1 megawatt to, as I said, allow for those smaller installations to take hold as well, and to, as I mentioned before, augment the grid as it is planned for the future. I hope I've answered the question adequately.
You did. Thank you. My last question, Minister, we have a problem, as you recognize, with vendors and the way how we treat the itinerant vendors across the landscape of this country. We see it on the highways every day with the coconut vendors, you see vegetable vendors, out of convenience. And I know your ministry would have moved apace to have vending zones across the length and breadth of constituencies in Barbados. The good people of Christchurch by Central have asked me today to ask you, because we have a number of visits to certain specific locations, and they are asking, when will this happen? What is your intention to have these vending zones as the new deal for persons who are interested in having a tangible stake in this country as business persons and entrepreneurs? Thank you.
Thank you for the question. Chairman, it's an important question, not just because I believe several years ago in a different incarnation, I sat on the select committee that created the vending zones and created the vending legislation as part of a public process. And so I'm vested in the implementation of the vending zones from that perspective long ago. Now sitting in the chair as the minister, I know that there is a concern in many instances, I believe among all of the colleagues in the chamber, that the vending zones needed for their constituents and across the country need to be implemented. I wish to update that just this week, we held a dedicated meeting with all of the various agencies, including the Urban and Rural Development Corporation, to be able to map out across the country urban and rural areas where the zones will be located, where they have not yet been identified. I want to thank all of the honorable members who have been submitting to the ministry your respective locations as was requested as part of these estimates of expenditure. And the intention during the course of the year, we already have 14 areas that have been submitted by members of this chamber on recommendation, and together with the Ministry with responsibility for business, the Ministry with responsibility for transport and works, the Ministry with responsibility for agriculture, as well as the RDC and the UDC now in their amalgamated form, both of their directors and their chairs have been engaged with the ministry on the mapping out of where we will go during the course of this financial year. And I give you the commitment that during this year, you will be seeing the rollout of an aggressive vending zone program in terms of construction. We also met with the planning department, PS is reminding me, but I want to invite Mr. Anderson Cumberbatch, who has been anchoring this project, to add any additional details. Anderson?
Thank you, Minister. My name is Anderson Cumberbatch. I'm the Chief Business Development Advisor within the ministry. Just by way of background information, we would remember that the vending program is part of a wider national initiative to decriminalize vending, promote vending as a viable employment option, and create safe vending zones, both for the vendors as well as those patronizing the vendors. As Minister would have indicated, we would have had some logistical challenges and so on, but those have been worked out. We now have a framework with which we are now able to deliver in a timely manner. And in a matter of weeks, we would be able to execute this program in a way that I think Barbados would be pleased with. Only yesterday, we would have visited some of the additional areas and so on, and now we are able to deliver on this project in a very expeditious way.
Thank you, Honourable Member for Christchurch West Central. Honourable Member for Christchurch West.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Good morning to you, Minister, and to your team. I'm going to start where the previous minister, well, but one, ended, and it has to do with storage. Clearly, there are other forms of storage, not only battery storage, but also hydrogen can be used as a mode of storage. And as I see that you've been in the press talking about this new and innovative hydrogen storage that has planning permission. And I would ask that you elaborate for the benefit of the country, because clearly there's nothing like it in the region. And we are anticipating and looking forward to seeing when we can have hydrogen storage in Barbados. So if you could elaborate for the benefit of us all. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Barbados is now, we've just launched, I believe last week, Barbados' first hydrogen cell project. This project uses a combination of solar PV, it uses battery energy storage systems for short-term storage and hydrogen for long-term storage. And why that is important is because long-term storage lowers the cost of the energy. If we use battery energy storage systems alone for short-term storage, I believe in an earlier intervention I mentioned that that's 4 hours of storage. But the intention here now for this particular project, it is what we call a fixed capacity project. This fixed capacity project then becomes, in effect, an extension of the grid by blending short-term with long-term storage. The fuel cell is being sourced by HDF. The entity it is a partnership with Rubis, which is an indication of the transition of existing fossil fuel majors now moving more aggressively into the renewable space and having a commitment to that net zero transition. RSB and HDF France, just a few weeks ago, their principals were here, and I'm proud to share that not only have we launched the project, we have approved the license, and they have completed their PPA, power purchase agreement negotiations, but we have also agreed with the principals that given that it is a new area for Barbados, that one of the things that we're looking for in collaboration with the principals is capacity building, skills development, and the development of regulatory support, and they have agreed that together with the entity, they will be supporting the development of capacity with the Fair Trading Commission in hydrogen cell technology for regulation, and also for the development of skills capacity building in country, so that in the same way we saw the development of solar PV installers and a small business sector emerging from Barbados' transition into the solar PV space, equally, We want to be able to see more and more small businesses, more and more Barbadian businesses evolving into these new evolving technologies to support an overall energy transition that is not only limited to solar PV, but all technologies, including hydrogen.
Thank you very much, Minister. And of course, this also gives the opportunity for export of energy, because hydrogen being then stored as ammonia then can be used for export, but that may be for another time. I would now like to move to my second question, Minister. And you know, as we often discuss, I was the chairman of the National Petroleum Corporation for 5 years during an expansion program. And at that time, we were able to almost double the number of people that were connected to the National Petroleum Corporation natural gas grid. And with that, I'm asking, does the National Petroleum Corporation, through you, have any further plans for another expansion program of the grid?
Thank you. Thank you for the question. Over the last few years, we've actually just completed a capital mains replacement and expansion program. This was in two packages, Package A and Package B. Two local contractors were responsible for rolling out that project, and that project took place principally in the southern and the central areas of the country, allowing for the natural gas mains replacements to be undertaken. Now, let me put it in context. I believe that the Honourable Chamber and the country has heard on more than one occasion about how aged the infrastructure for water is. Pipes, transmission and distribution pipes. The equivalent scenario applies to the natural gas infrastructure. This is 60 years old. And so it is important that the capital mains expansion program to which you referred takes place. And so we've started and just completed a pre-existing project. But we've also modeled using geographic information systems. We've modeled the existing grid. We've expanded, we've looked at where the expansion is. And again, as we did for electricity, we did the same thing for natural gas. So from St. Lucie to St. Philip, from St. Joseph and St. Andrew to St. Michael. We've looked at everything in between. And so we now know what it would take. And I know many of the honourable members here, your members, your constituents are asking about natural gas. And so we now can tell you what it would cost to be able to expand natural gas to the entire country. I believe we've also heard over the years that natural gas for Barbados is a bridging fuel. And so it is a transition fuel, and the commitment to using natural gas, in particular natural gas for cooking, is an important part of our energy transition investment plan as well. And so yes, the MPC has completed a mapping of the country for an expansion program. And if I can take the opportunity to say, before I ask Mr. Ian Bradshaw from MPC to take the floor, if I can take the opportunity to say, when we launched the existing program, for example, in locations like My Lord's Hill, that area would have had natural gas expansion taking place on the main roads. We made a commitment as a government to be able to ensure that persons in the adjacent communities had an opportunity to be connected to the natural gas grid. And so there are persons who were not previously on the grid in the My Lord's Hill area, in the Christchurch area, who have now been collected. In the St. Philip area, as a result of Wyndham's construction, we brought all of the adjacent communities that could fit onto the grid. And the commitment is that if we have an expansion program, we will move even further out. There are a few outliers that we are concerned by, where in previous incarnations, not under this administration, but previous incarnations, there were satellite stations that were established, but communities around were not onboarded. That's not our approach. And so I want to, at this point, invite Mr. Ian Bradshaw from the MPC to take the baton.
Good morning. My name is Ian Bradshaw from National Petroleum Corporation. Let me thank the Minister for giving me the opportunity to build on what she said. And Honourable Member, let me say that the desire for natural gas is still very strong. We understand that the mandate of National Petroleum Corporation is to extend our service to as many residents and businesses as possible. Over the last few years, that has been prohibitive because the cost of expansion certainly would have increased. And also, we appreciate the fact that as we position ourselves to be the bridging fuel, as was articulated by Honourable Prime Minister in our last speech, and it was important for us to fortify our current infrastructure. So our focus has been on capital maintenance. As our minister would have said, we were the beneficiary of funding from the IDB, and that allowed MPC to complete over 10.4 kilometers of mains replacement. And that is important as we try to change as much of the steel and cast iron infrastructure that we currently have. We still have at least 13% of the 350 mains that traverse the island. We still have 30% of that being steel and cast iron, and we are strategically looking to replace that as is required by industry standards. So we've been forced to balance the mains replacement and maintenance with also looking to create any opportunities where we can expand the grid. And how we've done that, we've collaborated with private contractors and state-owned entities wherever they were creating new housing opportunities. We took the opportunity to work with them to provide the service to as many businesses and residents of Barbados. I can name the areas of White Park Road where we worked. We can also speak to the areas of Webb Hill in St. Philip, and we are currently working in the area of Moores Bottom in St. Andrew too as well. So we'll continue to look for these opportunities to expand the grid and give more and more residents the opportunity.
Thank you very much, Minister. And I don't want to date Mr. Bradshaw, but he was there when I was there as chairman, so you get an idea of how long Mr. Bradshaw has been there at MPC. But I wanna go a little further. In addition, we had quite a reasonable drilling program. And as you know, Barbados, when it gets oil, it gets associated gas. And that gas is what we use for the National Petroleum Corporation because we had a drilling program. It's unfortunate that the last administration before us brought those drilling programs to an end, and therefore we've not benefited from the associated gas that would have benefited the nation, and therefore have been relegated to importing all of our natural gas. Can you advise the country as to whether there is any intention to restart the drilling? Because obviously we'd benefit from the associated gas associated with those exploration programs.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, the honourable member has asked about the cessation of the drilling program. Barbados has approximately over 250, I believe 254 or 257 onshore wells. Of that number, I believe only 55 or so are in use. Many of them have been retired. I'm going to ask Mr. James Brown, who is here, if he can come in. That's being done under not MPC, but specifically the Barbados National Oil Company. They sit at this point in a position where they are rationalizing how to treat to the retirement of the majority of our wells. And so there is an active program which has been started since last year to give an assessment as to the status of the wells. What I can say to you is that the instruction has been given to the team before we would have a retirement program, which Mr. Brown is going to speak about, a retirement program that if you did not reach the economic value of being able to extract the cost of extraction from the wells, that was the primary basis on which they retired those wells. And so that ongoing work right now on all of the existing wells is expected to be completed over the coming weeks. There is a program as well to start with seismic data as well, which we did not have before, but we've now made the commitment to undertake that work. And between now and all the way up to, I believe the work program takes us up to 2027, we will be in a position to look at what the capital cost will be for the investment in the onshore wells, how they can be used. Both, the truth is there is associated gas, and so Jamar White, who is here, I'm going to ask him to come in as well. He always describes it to me as like a Coke bottle, and honourable member, you would know what I mean when I talk about a Coke bottle. When you shake it, the coke is the oil, but what fizzes when you open the top is the gas, and so it's integrated. And so how we go about separating the oil from the gas is also a part of that program. And then a carbon capture, because there's also the NZE transition, a carbon capture program using the retired wells where full extraction has already taken place. But I'm gonna come first to Mr. Jamar White, and then to Mr. James Brown.
But before they start, I would also ask, because technologies from 2003, 2008 have improved.
Absolutely.
So therefore, the opportunities to take what were retired wells but get additional gas and oil from them obviously has changed. So I would hope that they would include that in their response as well.
Most certainly. Mr. White? In the meantime, I'll start with Mr. James Brown while Mr. White makes his way down.
Good morning to everyone. My name is James Brown. I'm the CEO of the Barbados National Oil Company. Yes, we are quite aware that there's a significant reduction in the local gas. We have been working with the National Petroleum Corporation with an attempt to try to increase this gas. Now, over the last couple of years, the production has declined to a point where now we supply approximately 30% of the gas that's consumed. We still do have the wells. We've invested quite a bit of money in the wells, and we've had a primary recovery from a lot of these wells. Primary recovery allows us to extract approximately 10% of the oil and gas in place. And now we are at a phase where now we have to implement secondary and tertiary recovery systems. We've looked at, over the last couple of years, at secondary recovery systems, and we've looking actively to implement a program where we extract some of the oil from the wells. And at the same time, we will extract the same natural gas too as well. Now, we do have wells where we would have done primary recovery in the lower part of the wells, and we've come up in the wells, and we've extracted more gas. Now, what we are seeking to do is to review the entire field. We're going to undertake a program where we will look to maximize the productivity from the wells, so increase the primary recovery from the 10%. We'll try to use different techniques, whether it's nitrogen or CO2, where we try to displace the natural gas that's in place and try to recover some of the gas that's in place. The other thing that we're looking to do too as well, where we might have looked at some of the hydrocarbons to recover, we're looking at a program where we will seek to perforate these wells, reshoot them, resensitize the wells, and try to extract more natural gas from the current wells with the attempt to try to increase more local gas production. If that answers your question.
If Mr. Jamar White.
Hi, good morning, Chairman. Good morning, members, colleagues. Jamar White, Director of Natural Resources in the Ministry of Energy and Business. I think my colleague, Mr. Brown, answered quite comprehensively. What I would add to the discussion is that traditionally, when oil was king many years ago, there was a purposeful, I guess, action of producing oil in favor of gas. So many of the wells that we have today have left back a significant portion of gas resources due to that priority back in the day because of the economics of producing oil as opposed to gas. So there is now the potential for doing enhanced recovery, as Mr. Brown spoke to extract the remaining gas reserves within those wells. So as far as we understand, we believe there's significant potential for that. The company has identified potential partners to work with them to determine how best to get that gas out of the ground through enhanced recovery techniques. And we're very encouraged by the potential for doing that in the coming future. So it is a program that we are looking forward to launching, and we hope that will assist us with achieving our goal of maximizing the gas recovery from the fields, as gas has been identified as a critical transition fuel. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Minister. My final question has to do with the cleanup at the mobile refinery. And you'd be aware that we had started a characterization, or certainly our request for proposals went out for characterization. And I would ask, where are we with that project to be able to get some advance on the cleanup at the mobile refinery?
Thank you, Minister. I think at this stage, we're balancing both the substantive work that needs to be done and the finalization of the required documentation to be able to facilitate the commencement of that work. There has been an extensive body of work underway between the proposed. Let me start by saying actually that there was a tender that was issued through Bonfire, the government procurement platform. Persons responded. There was a procurement committee meeting. The procurement committee selected a successful tender, and that process is now going through the Solicitor General's office with the successful tenderer. And I'm going to ask Mr. Jamar White to respond to that specifically, especially to talk about what is proposed for the mobile site, given that we currently have not yet been able to complete the legal work. Mr. White?
Good morning again. Thanks for the question. Jamar White, Director of Natural Resources in the Ministry of Energy. As Minister said, we are in the advanced stages of completing the review and finalization of the contract for the project. As you're very well aware, we deem the project to be very critical because we need to understand the nature and extent of the contamination in the area, and that will help to guide the future remediation of the site. And the site has been earmarked for future development, and we are treating it as a priority. So we are going through the final stages with the SG and the successful tenderer to finalize the approval of the company documents and the other legal documents that will go into the final contract, and we expect that to be done in very short order. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Minister. I want to congratulate you on the tremendous job that you're doing in the energy sector and all the various competing interests all through the various departments that you are responsible for. Mr. Chair, I yield back to you.
Thank you very much, Honourable Member. Honourable Member for St. Michael South Central.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to welcome the Honourable Minister and her team to this chamber. Let me, so that since it is fresh in people's minds, pick up on the energy theme. And this is really quite a simple question. I posed it earlier when he was in the well to your senior minister, but I suspect that you may be better placed to address the matter. I was very intrigued to hear about the energy transition and investment plan. Certainly to see the excitement of the officer that is working on it, which we've come to expect from her. There is also, Minister, a Barbados 2035 document that is itself, I believe, an investment plan valued at some $11.6 billion for the country. The question I posed previously that perhaps you can help us understand in the context of this new energy transition and investment plan that I assume goes alongside the Barbados 2035 plan, and perhaps you will help us understand how. But the fact is that the energy needs of the country are fluid and quite frankly growing. As the very recent minister responsible for industry, you and I have spoken about those needs in industry. The fact that Barbados is increasingly going more into chemical processing, particularly pharmaceuticals, energy and water, thirsty, if you pardon the pun, industries, as well as into data centers. which is also extremely energy hungry. Given this industrial thrust that the country has stipulated, what does that mean? And if I can encourage you humbly and your team, there's a lot of jargon in your ministry, and when you make reference to things like NDCs and abatement technology and all kinds of things, just perhaps those listening might need a little bit of explanation. But really, how do we balance this? In practical terms, what can we come to expect in terms of what can we practically scale up on? What can we really execute in the context of industry while we have this plan for what you've termed as abatement, which essentially means how you reduce greenhouse gas emissions. So in the context of this investment, the second investment plan or complementary investment plan, what are your thoughts on what are the plans for making sure that industry has the energy required into the future?
Thank you for the question, and we most definitely have had these conversations in very recent times. So there are two energy plans, but they are actually meant to be complementary. As a matter of fact, the first incarnation of the Energy Transition Investment Plan, once it was drafted, became the basis on which that National Investment Plan was developed. The energy component of that was then pulled from Barbados's Energy Transition Investment Plan. This is a further update. And so they're not at odds, but they're meant to be going hand in hand. What I would say as well is that in developing, whether it is the Energy Transition Investment Plan, which takes us out to 2035, on an annual basis, those emerging demands, those evolving demands will change as a result of policy positions being taken, whether it is in industry, whether it is in technology, on things like data centers. And it is important that we then are in a position not to stick slavishly to long-range planning, but to pivot in real time to make sure we have a complementary and a supplementary short-range plan. What I can tell you is that every year so far since I've been in the chair, what we've done is we looked at the forecast for the year. We forecasted demand. We've looked at every sector. So for example, with the ministry with responsibility for planning, we look at what is the public sector investment program? What is the private sector investment program? With the ministry with responsibility for housing, where are the housing developments going? And we begin to look then at the industrial sector as well, and we hear from industry, what are your development plans for the year? And on the basis of that, we begin to simulate a forecast showing what the demand is, and that then impacts on what we call the socialization of the Integrated Resource and Resilience Plan, which says, this is the energy we expect to be looking at, this is where we can draw it from, these are the existing resources, this is what we don't have, this is what we need, this is the time frame within which we can get it, and this is the projected cost. We, for example, can tell you over last year, we sat with all of the energy agencies and stakeholders and planners, and we looked at what the forecast for the year was. So we then knew that because it was hotter last year in terms of climate issues now, we saw that there was an increased demand for cooling, which meant that more AC units, more fans being used, there was peak demand. With an increased number of arrivals for tourism, the tourism sector, we saw with more people on the country, on the island, there was an increased consumption of electricity. That demand in 2023 held true through 2024. And based on the projections for 2025, we expect that we will also see a holding of that increased demand, if not an increase towards the end of the year as we return into the tourist season. So across every sector, we are simulating how we match long-term policy plans, long-term investment plans, and shorter range implementation systems that allow for us to bring everything together coherently. I hope that that helps to answer the question.
Thanks, Minister. I made a note on my pad here when you, earlier questions, answers, and even just now, you kept talking about simulations, which I understand is part of the process. However, I do believe that there needs to come a time, and perhaps you're holding it close to your chest ahead of your big launch next week at the Sustainable Energy for All conference. So I understand. But there has to come a time when we're able to say to industry, is this a practical investment, given the resource requirements? And this is the kind of information that we need to be able to communicate. And so I hope that when we hear about when you launch the plan next week, that we can get a little bit more of that certainty to understand what is the energy match that we're making between pharmaceuticals and what is the energy mix that supports that, data centers, what's the energy mix that supports that. I think the industry is crying out for that. Let me move now quickly though to I hesitate because I wasn't so sure whether it's to say CAIPO or to say Business Barbados. Because, look, I think it's encouraging to see the transition that's being made, and nobody can deny that operationally and administratively it is being handled efficiently in terms of the transition. What people want to know and hear and be assured of is that the problems that they're having with the existing CAIPO, that even through attempts at having online processes and so on, I think many in business believe have not materially improved. And what I am not asking is about the operational process of establishing Business Barbados. What I am asking is, when will people who have to deal with CAIPO every day and those processes have a certain sense of predictability and efficiency and value in terms of the things that they need done?
Thank you, Honourable Member. I'm going to just step back a little bit to the first question, just to say that when we started this process on the Energy Transition Investment Plan, we did meet with at the time, Barbados Manufacturers Association. We did have a dedicated meeting with them, and we asked them to share with us on behalf of industry what the substantive needs were. We had a discussion at the time also around the retirement of existing generation or energy assets. And so, for example, you have some entities that have huge ovens, for example, that are driven by natural gas, or they are driven by diesel, or they're driven by kerosene. What is the life cycle of those assets? What is the retirement schedule? In the same way that we do this for the utility, for example, so there is a retirement schedule that then allows for them to transition and include it as part of their new capital infrastructure investment programming, what then they would need to do to transition into the renewable energy space or into the natural gas space. And so I agree with you that there is the need for that detailed working in the weeds, so to speak, the fine work, so to speak, as we go through the implementation. On the second part of the question, Honourable Member, to say that this has been a beast of burden would probably really be an understatement. And it's not just a beast of burden for the members of the business community and the public sector in dealing with what was CAIPO, but let me put it up front, and I am joined right here to my right by the former registrar of CAIPO, who is now with Business Barbados. It has been a beast of burden for the staff of CAIPO as well. They have also borne the burden by way of addressing what they have navigated over 30 years. This office has had the responsibility of administering the provisions of the Companies Act, and directly and indirectly a range of related pieces of legislation they have held responsibility for. They have not, over that entire period of time, had the full complement of staff, the full complement of skills, the full complement of technology innovations, and as a consequence, it has affected them and it has affected the business climate in Barbados, and it has affected the public of Barbados. And so that's not something that I've always been very clear. I don't step back from it. It was my responsibility once I assumed the chair to face it and to fix it, not make excuses for it. If it existed for 30 years, it existed for 30 years, but we were responsible for fixing it. And so the work began as soon as we got the go-ahead to make the reforms, to look at the exact processes that were causing the public pain, that were causing the business community frustration. And I want to invite at this time the Honourable, I want to invite the officer in charge of Business Barbados and the former registrar of KIPO, who herself, if I were to describe KIPO as a beast of burden, she has sat on its rear, on its back, trying to tame this beast. So over to you, Ms. Tamisha Rochester.
Good morning, honorable members. I am Tamisha Rochester, officer in charge of Business Barbados. And I start with the analogy the honorable minister just made in terms of taming the beast, but I don't think that it does the situation full justice. As the minister said, we know what the issues are. We are all well aware of the struggles that we have faced, and I say we, myself and my team, not only the ones from 30 years ago, but the ones now, have been faced throughout the years. The complaints, the brunt of the complaints and the fury felt on the backs of our staff, sometimes in situations where they're doing the best they can with the resources they have. So we have felt that burden. And transformation is not only looking or identifying one things that are not working and trying to fix them here and plug a gap here and stop a hole here. Transformation has to be fundamental for it to work, and it has to get to the root of what the issues are instead of putting a plaster on a sore, so to speak. So what the team has done, and a very small team under the guidance of our minister, we have looked at the transformation of what was KIPO on a whole. So not just fixing issues that have been there from time immemorial, but looking at what the country needs in 2025 to make it competitive, not only regionally, but globally. So in essence, turning it on its head, building something completely new, which has not been done before. So the team, and a very small team, has over the past year and a half, so to speak, have been working nose to the grinder, blood, sweat, and tears working to make sure that there are several work streams that have been addressed in order to bring Business Barbados to fruition. So we have had process reengineering. What is this? This is where we have looked at all of the processes that fall under the various pieces of legislation, broken them down, or for want of better words, deconstruct and reconstruct. We've identified what works, what does not work, what is inefficient, what needs to be improved, for 400 plus processes spanning various types of entities, and the different processes they have to go through. There's also been a digital team, and being very frank, the team at KIPO, our efforts have been hindered by having systems in place that are not necessarily fit for purpose, which are frustrating not only to the business community, but to the staff. So when you are working in a digital environment with technology that is not working for you, it creates more frustration than it does solve problems. So the digital had to be examined, again, in a very fundamental manner. So not only looking at what we have and where things need to be plugged to fix it, but what do we need overall for the entity Business Barbados and also to support the runnings of the corporate registry. In addition to these work streams, we have had the HR work stream. Our people are our resources, and we need to make sure that they're brought along, and they're brought along in a way that is no less favorable to them than what they would have obtained before. So we had to implement culture work in order to change a culture that had existed for years and to bring the culture into what is required for excellent service delivery in 2025. And it is a work in progress. I always consider it akin to fixing the plane while flying it. We are doing this work and we are doing our day-to-day work as well. We also had on board branding, marketing, communications teams, the financial modeling to make sure that we can sustainably support the initiatives and the activities and the business can sustain itself. Looking at other ways in which we can bring a benefit to the Barbadian people. So what extended services can we offer? So we're not only improving on what we have done, but we are extending to bring you new services, business advisory, guidance, hand-holding, opening the customer's eyes to different possibilities, IP benefits, not only registering and leaving it there, but after you register what, we commercialize it. So all of this work has been going on for, as I said, about a year and a half. And the entire idea behind it is that there is to be fundamental transformation. So it is not a rebranding of KIPO. It is something fundamentally different and fundamentally new. And in doing so, we have to make sure that we capture all of the various elements. So as much as we would like to sprinkle some fairy dust or wave the magic wand and have everything change in an instant, we have to make sure that the process is comprehensive and that we cover all of the aspects in order to see the vision of a customer-first business model. So integrating that into everything that is done. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Just to wrap up, I do support the thrust and the effort. However, I fear that what was answered was precisely what I said I was not asking, which is the process, but more a sense of what people can come to expect as the impact, and perhaps that can be very quickly mentioned in consideration. My last question, which is the following. Now, when it comes to business, there is in the Ministry of Business, there's fund access, there's trust loans. We heard this morning about vending zones. In the Ministry of Industry, Innovation, Science and Technology, there is BIDC that's responsible for exports. There's Enterprise Growth Fund Limited in the Ministry of Finance. There's the Industrial Credit Fund. There's the Housing Credit Fund. There are facilities at the Central Bank. What I'm saying is that the question of business facilitation, small business development, everything we need to understand about industry from the smallest to the largest is spread across the government. One may infer what I am suggesting from what I have just described, but certainly the country, I feel, would benefit from rationalization of how these things are managed. So my question then is as follows, and even the vending zones throws up the question of administration and common standards and who's responsible for what across markets, across agriculture, across things that have to be considered by the government. But recently, Minister, as you're well aware, there's been a lot of discussion, again, from stakeholders from the market about understanding the incentive structure across industry, from small to large, understanding what is being put in place, and I'm not one of these people who believes that incentives are the only way to work to growth in a mature and emerging economy. But what I'm trying to understand is, what is the landscape of small business development? What should be the expectations of entrepreneurs from your ministry? What should the market understand about government's efforts to support small business, bearing in mind that these exist in so many different places, and perhaps could benefit from some rationalization?
That's a fantastic question, and I am so glad that someone asked it. I want to take a few minutes, my full time on this question, if you would allow me, Mr. Chairman. So, first of all, I agree with the honourable member entirely about the broader role of business facilitation beyond CAIPO, and this is something that we've been talking about repeatedly in the transformation from Business Barbados. This is about a whole of government approach, and I want to give the Chamber and specifically the honourable member the assurance that the commitment certainly from my own part, and I know I can count on the collaboration and cooperation of all of the other members, certainly the members of cabinet, that this has to be a whole of government approach. There are challenges, no doubt, dealing with the various agencies of government. In instances, we have challenges with one department over another, and someone asks me a lot of times, well, how is Business Barbados treating to that? And so how do you eat an elephant that is all of business, all of government, one at a time, one bite at a time? And so we're starting with the immersed CAIPO that has been absorbed within the belly of this particular beast. But we're very clear that the beast is bigger than just CAIPO, and it is government-wide. But it is not just government-wide either. It is also private sector-wide. And so on that basis, one of the areas that Business Barbados has also begun work on is with the private sector entities. How long does it take to open a bank account in the country to be able to undertake the kind of work and engagement with fund access or trust loans or commercial bank enterprise growth fund? How long does it take for us to get management accounts to be able to submit to these agencies to get loan access to loan capital? So what we want to be able to do, and we have had the commitment already so far from ICAB, is that together they will work with Business Barbados to identify what different types of transactions, whether it's the Housing Credit Fund or any other EGFL, any other entity, what type of information is needed, and how do we simplify the process of accessing that information? So that is a whole of country approach, not just a whole of government, but a whole of country approach. Now to the business of small business. Just last week, I'm happy to share that we have adopted at the level of cabinet a 2025 medium, small, micro, small, and medium-sized enterprise development policy and a strategy. It is brand new. So the ministry has an MSME policy and an MSME strategy. It allows for us to build on work that was started. The last MSME policy was in 2016. That 2016 policy was updated in 2020, but in between there and now, we've had COVID. We've had all different types of scenarios that have changed the way in which businesses operate and the things that businesses need. And as a government, we've been committed to treating to those things. Also, under the ministry, in these estimates of expenditure this year, you will see increased allocations for the business support organizations that fall under the ministry, so we can focus on institutional development, specifically for the Small Business Association, which has been leading the charge for as long as all of us can remember. There has been a Small Business Association, an increased allocation for the Barbados Coalition of Service Industries to be able to develop a dedicated approach to supporting the services sector. And also you will see that there has been work undertaken. You may not see it in full in the estimates, but certainly in the reporting, you will see under fund access and trust loans, an expanded program of development, which also includes financial literacy and support being provided to the various small business entities and to entrepreneurs. During the course of this year, within 6 months, we will have an implementation roadmap for that MSME policy, which identifies for me, and I believe, like the honourable member who just spoke, what is not monitored is not done. What is not measured is not done. And so our intention, certainly my intention as I sit in the chair, is to ensure that the policy which we just approved at Cabinet within the last week now has an annual time frame. What do we intend to achieve each year, year on year? what are the priorities? Are we getting them done? What are the obstacles, and how do we roll them out? Because the small business sector expects that of us. And so the MSME policy now gives us a broad national framework to provide the kind of support that the honorable member has asked for, and the increases in allocations to the business support organizations under this entity provide us with institutionalized support for the implementation of this MSME policy and strategy.
Thank you, Chair. I yield the floor.
Mr. Chair, I beg to move that you now report progress to His Honor the Speaker and beg for leave to sit again.
The question is that they do not report progress to His Honor the Speaker and beg for leave to sit again. All honorable members in favor, say aye. Honorable members against, say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Has reported progress and request to leave the sit again. Our member for Christchurch West.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move that this honorable chamber be now suspended until 12:25.
12, 20?
10 minutes. 12:25.
The question is that this honorable chamber be suspended for 10 minutes. All those honorable members in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against, please say no. Me think the ayes have it. This honorable chamber stands suspended for 10 minutes. This sitting is resumed. Prior to the suspension, this House was in Standing Finance Committee. We return to Standing Finance Committee.
This House is in Standing Finance Committee. Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
I defer, sir. Nothing. Thank you.
Thank you. Honourable Minister, I will now fill this slot. Deferred to me by the Honourable Leader of the Opposition. I want to find out from you what the performance of the trust loans has been. This has been a very, is a very integral part of business development, and a number of persons out there, in particular from the constituency of St. Lucie, have benefited from this project run by your ministry. And persons are asking every day, how? So we want to share information about how you can be part of this. What is the process? What has been the success of this agency so far, the trust loans, and how really you can benefit from such? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I am joined from the trust loans by Mr. Jerry Amos, and I'm going to invite him in a few moments to follow on from my initial response to the question. Now, Mr. Chairman, I mentioned just before we broke about the development of the launch of, the finalization of an MSME strategy and policy for Barbados, which we have just completed. The access to capital, the ability to access capital, is one of the issues that was identified in that strategy as we engaged with a broad cross-section of stakeholders. People want to be able to have more than a single source of income. People want to be able to go into business. People need to be able to have seed capital. In many instances, as a part of that strategy, there is an entire pillar in that strategy dedicated to the formalization of the business activity in the business sector. And so people want to be able to have access to a bank account and to be able to access credit. The trust loans, as it was designed for exactly all of those things. And so over the last several years, the trust loans has continued to provide loan capital, starting with, in the initial stages, $5,000 for those persons who particularly are in the informal sector, have never had a bank account, they have an idea, they want to begin to get into business, and they have come for the initial seeding of their business. Then, once successful and want to repay, they can come back again to further scale a business with a second incarnation, this time at $10,000. And over the last 5 years, we've been able to see how that has evolved. From 2020 to 2025, and I can share some data, on average, we have seen the capital being disbursed for on-lending by the trust loans is around the vicinity of $2 million, $2.1 million in 1 year, $3.4 million in another year, $2.3 million in another year, $2.251 in another year, and at its lowest year, only because the year has not yet been completed in 2024, $1.998, just under $2 million in disbursements. We have the allocation by male and female, by sector, agriculture, cultural industries, manufacturing, retail. We have a heavy concentration, especially in the retail and in the services sector and in the tourism sector. In this last financial year, Mr. Chairman, I believe we had the World Cup, for example, and many of these small business persons who have had the benefit of trust loans, and yes, of course, fund access, benefited from just down the road from here, Broad Street being closed off for the first time in its history for a mall, where small business people, alongside the biggest merchants in the country, were able to come and showcase their wares several Saturdays and to be able to have the opportunity for business. Mr. Amos is going to come and he's going to share how we now have a satellite office in St. Peter, very close to your constituency, Honourable Member, to support the accessibility of persons to come and engage with the trust loans. And then we also are in the process, every single month you can see a pop-up emerging where you have the ability to showcase the wares. And then the final thing that I would say is that fund access, trust loans, together with Export Barbados, have also been investing, and BNSI, in the Manufest program, which is about helping the constituents of the members of this honorable chamber, not just to access capital, but to also have the opportunity then just not to showcase the capital, but to export. And one of the clients, several of the clients just came back actually from New York, where they were under the support of Export Barbados, and they started in trust loans to be able to build their business. So if you were to ask, Mr. Chairman, how is the program going, I would have to say that it is doing exactly what it was intended to do in creating opportunities for those in the informal sector to come into the formal space and benefit from not just capital, but business development resources. I'm going to ask Mr. Jerry Amos if he can continue from there.
Thank you very much, Minister. The name Jerry Amos, CEO of the Barbados Trust Fund Limited. Honourable members, good afternoon. Honourable Member Phillips, MP Phillips, is so interested to hear that coming from you, praising the trust fund, because only recently, as we had our community events, I realized that we had missed St. Lucie. And when I look back at the year 2020 and our performance in that year, I know that majority of our clients came from St. Lucie and they are performing extremely well. Now, what we have done, as the Minister mentioned, is that for 2025 and 2026, we are rolling out a very aggressive community program. And when I look at the outline that was given to BSD by staff, I realized that St. Lucie and St. Peter, even though those have been passed, that we are going back to those communities to ensure that we go on a road trip, business to business, trying to engage more persons from these parishes to take the opportunity to join the trust fund family. We realized that, as was mentioned, that a lot of persons in communities are not aware of the Barbados Trust Fund Limited, so we found that it's interested that we get out there and take our program to these entrepreneurs to make sure that we help them to enhance their business, not only to come for a loan, but also business development, financial training, and to ensure that these businesses can grow with the help of the ecosystem.
Thank you. Indeed, I'm aware that a number of persons, constituents have benefited tremendously from this, and certainly I will continue to approach you on their behalf and encourage them to approach as well, so that they can benefit from this tremendous project put in place by the government. As a follow, I don't think that I heard you explained or how they can, or what they need to do to be able to benefit. What is the process? Can they come directly to you? Go ahead, Minister.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, they do. I'm congratulating the trust loans team, because in making sure that people feel comfortable coming directly to them, both trust loans and fund access. They have a business development team, which is there, and they're there to focus on serving client needs. And so oftentimes what you would see in both of these institutions is that clients come, they sometimes come into the lobby of the office, or they call and they get connected with an officer who guides them from start to finish. Throughout the life cycle of the loan as well, they have the benefit of the financial literacy training before disbursements, especially at the level of fund access, so that you are not just giving people money, but you're helping them to understand how it is to be applied in their business. There are instances where sometimes a small business may come and they may think they have a given set of needs, but when the business development team works with them in that one-on-one engagement, then they say, well, I actually need this, and I hadn't thought of that, and then that helps to scope the loan. But the one thing that I want to take the time to say here today in celebration of both fund access and trust loans, Mr. Chairman, is that during COVID, so many of the persons who had gone forward for loans found themselves with business interruption and had difficulties. These teams, these business development teams, these business development officers made it their business in many instances to go out to these businesses and to meet one-on-one with people where they were, and to be able to engage with them, so that it meant that you were not just, as Prime Minister likes to say, seeing people, hearing people, but you were also feeling people and identifying what their challenges were, and then being in a position to respond to that. Those are the things that we typically don't see all the time, but I want to be able to use this platform to elevate the work that was done by Trust Loans and Fund Access to particularly respond to those persons who were in distress.
Thank you, Minister. My next area that I want to want you to shed some light on, I know you would have spoken a bit to, to vending and the vending zones, etc., and the effort to establish these zones across Barbados. I also know that you are pursuing the setting up of cooperatives and so on within the country as well. I have had the benefit of discussions with officers from your ministry a few weeks ago in relation to that. And persons are a bit, the glass is a bit cloudy in relation to the setting up of these cooperatives. Persons want to know, I have a large farming community. I have a number of small businesses within St. Lucie who would have benefited from the same trust loans that we just spoke about, but would want them to be able to see the importance of cooperatives and so on. So I would want you to expand and give us some information on the cooperatives and how you really go about it. What does it do? What are the benefits in being part of a cooperative?
Thank you, Chair. I'm not sure if Mr. Brent Gittins is in the well or if he's in the gallery, but I'm going to invite him, if not, to begin making his way, because I'm going to pivot to him in a moment. But Chair, thank you for the question on cooperatives. I think, if I can speak frankly, one of the genuine challenges that I think people who look like those of us in this chamber have when dealing with doing business is trusting anyone else. There are communities across this country that they don't call them cooperatives, but they collaborate with others in the development of business ideas and business concepts. They go to commercial institutions, and if you were to use formal terms, spread the risk around with multiple people. They have lawyers, and the lawyer structure was my share versus was your share. But we do have a culture that is very mistrustful of others when dealing with doing business. And that's really where the work of cooperatives come in. It allows you to spread the risk. It allows you to share the risk with others. It allows you to engage in building economies of scale, economies of scope. You're able to get more with less. Rather than being in charge of 100% of something small, it allows you perhaps to be a part of something much bigger with your share. but especially where different businesses can come together and build on a partnership. So in a farming community, for example, as you've mentioned, Chairman, what are my major areas of expenditure? How could I lower my recurring expenses if I were to come together with a group of others in the same community to invest in procuring equipment and share that equipment across the community? How do I come together to invest in the procurement of pesticides or insecticides, seeds, farming equipment, so that I am able to collaborate, lower my individual costs by sharing those costs with a group of people, and then being in a position to increase my earnings because I've had to outlay less. And so the work of the cooperatives this year, as you have begun to see, is now very community-centered, is heavily sectoral sector focused, and we intend over the course of the year to be able to go from, as we've done in the energy sector, I've spoken about it with grid, with natural gas, and the same thing applies to the business sector of the ministry, specifically co-ops, from St. Lucie, where the discussions have started with you, to St. Peter, where the discussions have already been framed for the member for St. Peter, to St. Thomas, which is happening now, and all the way out to St. Philip and everything in between, so that the entire country is able to benefit from an education on why to participate in a cooperative, what cooperatives exist that they can also be a part of, how can we form new cooperatives, and how can we in the ministry help to support that as part of our business development agenda. That is part of the work of the MSME strategy, and I'm going to ask Mr. Brent Gittins to elaborate a little bit more on the work that he has already started, and even in his small department, he has now taken it national.
Thank you, Minister Cummins. I'm Brent Gittins, Registrar of Cooperatives. And as the Minister said, this year has been designated International Year of Cooperatives by the United Nations General Assembly. And one of the objectives of the year is to spread awareness throughout the diaspora about the benefits of cooperatives and the type of sustainable development that they can cause. So the Cooperatives Department has embarked on a community development program, an outreach program. We actually, a team, and I actually spent some time in St. Lucie recently, where we engaged with a number of small businesses in St. Lucie. And they were, I would say, very open to the idea of working together, because cooperatives is about working together. And we do intend to go into each parish. We are finalizing some spaces and some times for St. Peter and St. Thomas as I speak. So the aim is to create significant public awareness of cooperatives going into each parish and making the diaspora aware that working in groups is always better than working individually. Sometimes we will work with business clusters. A business cluster that we work with was a business cluster that was partnered with the Trust Loan Fund. The Unified Trust Cooperative is now a formal cooperative. So we work with groups, we work with individual entrepreneurs, and the message is that pooling resources together, pooling ideas together, money, is always a better way to go. As the minister said, you can create economies of scale, you can buy in bulk, you can lobby to the government for certain things that you may need. And the process of forming a cooperative is relatively simple. You need 10 persons to form a cooperative. You come and you have some discussions with me and my team, because we like to find out if it is if the business you want to form is viable. And we ensure that you present us with a viable business plan as well before we move forward. So we like to let people come and have some serious discussions with us to find out exactly what type of area they're planning to go into for their cooperative, because a cooperative can be anything. We are actually now in the process of registering a beekeeping cooperative, because the beekeepers have realized that coming together is much better idea than working individually. So I think the cooperative movement will get better and better. Thank you.
Thank you. Honorable member, Minister, I will now move to another. My next question is on a different area, but I am going to, since we are into the vending and the setting up cooperatives and so on, I am going to leave that till later and move on to the honorable member for St. James South.
Thank you very much, Chair. I just want to offer congratulations to the team. A lot of very good work has come forward, and I just have two areas that I want to speak to in relation to some work that you've done. I was very pleased to hear about the MSME strategy and the wonderful things that are going to be done that will help to transform small businesses. And we know that they form the backbone of the economy when you take them all together, and therefore they're very important. So I wanted to hear some more on, if you're at liberty, to share what are some of the things now that will happen for that MSME sector that will help to transform it and help to make them feel a part of the Barbadian prosperity and be able to participate in the opportunities that will be coming the way of our economy.
Thank you very much, Honourable Member, and I know that small business is very close to your heart. And so this is an important conversation that we're happy to facilitate. Now, under the MSME policy and strategy, there were any number of measures that were recommended across a number of pillars and so on, and I want to get into some of these specifics, but let me start first by saying that the last body of work done on the MSME sector as a whole dated back to 2016, where the Small Business Association had a study done by the Sir Arthur Lewis Institute of the University of the West Indies, and I'm sure you are familiar with that study, which looked at the size of the economy. And that study found that close to 98% of the sector of the country, in terms of businesses, were in the micro, small, and medium-sized economy. We had less than 5% of the businesses in the country constituting large-scale enterprises. And so that body of work is dated. And so the Small Business Association, as I speak now, with support from the Central Bank of Barbados, is now undertaking a full assessment of where the MSME sector presently stands. And I want to commend the SBA for continuing to lead the charge and to advocate on behalf of that sector. There were a number of things that were identified in the 2025 policy and strategy for MSMEs. One of those things was skills, the availability of skills, or rather the lack of availability of skills in some of the areas that the MSME sector was interested in. And so we have agreed internal to the ministry from funds which are already under our concern and are captured in these estimates that there will be a skills development program to support the MSME sector in the areas that they identify over the course of the current body of work that is there. In addition, they identified access to capital as one of the challenges. And I spoke earlier about the work of fund access and trust loans. But one of the things that we will be working on during the course of this year is a restructuring and a reform of these two institutions to make them easier, even easier for persons to be able to access. And quite simply, I want to perhaps use one example. If I have gone through Fund Act trust loans as an entrepreneur, I've started my small business, I've borrowed $5,000, I've come back, I've borrowed $10,000, I've had the benefit of the financial literacy and the business development support. Two agencies under the same ministry and by the same government, what is the relationship between the two? Can I then scale my business by moving on without starting from scratch as if I'd had no previous relationship and go to fund access and be able to use my credit history, which is the reason trust loans was established in the first place, to move seamlessly from one institution on to the next in fund access? How do we then put measures in place to allow for these two institutions, once it is seamless between the two for graduation, not just from 5 to 10, but from institution to institution, how do we then create a relationship where we can structure financial deals and structures with the commercial banking system where we want to be able to increase the appetite for small business development? So access to capital is one of the other areas that we will be seeing. We also have the financial literacy program. When we talk about financial literacy typically for us so far has been concentrated in online, community, and heavily in the schools area. But how do we now have financial literacy rolled out that blends small business development with how to use that capital to grow your business more heavily? How do you then take that into the CSME space, for example, for regional exports? What kind of supporting mechanisms do small businesses need to be able to grow their businesses? One of the things we found, Chair, quite honestly, was that too many businesses were starting small and staying small. And so we want to be able to provide all of the mechanisms to be able to grow it. We have had the approval with support from the Inter-American Development Bank of an enhanced credit guarantee scheme, which exists at the Central Bank of Barbados. That has just been replenished, and that is for the MSME sector. That allows for credit guarantees supported by intermediary banks to go along with these mechanisms. And if I can say that for the energy sector, if I can tie that in, we're very proud, and Delano, he didn't mention it earlier, but we're very proud as well to have launched a carve-out, which is an innovative financial mechanism, which is a liquidity support mechanism within that MSME Enhanced Credit Guarantee Scheme, where if in the energy sector, the utility, for whatever reasons, in an extreme circumstance, is unable to pay these businesses, then they are able to draw down on the liquidity support under the Enhanced Credit Guarantee Scheme. So trying to keep people whole, trying to improve access, and trying to be able to help them to grow. Those are some of the things under the financing pillar alone that we're hoping to do during the course of this year.
Before you continue, Honourable Member for St. James South, I want to acknowledge the presence of the Honourable Minister of State for External Affairs, Pabitra Margarita, who today accepted the honor of the Pride of Barbados, the Freedom of Barbados Award in recognition. He did this on the behalf of President Modi from in India, who, because of their work in recognition of India's support for Barbados during the COVID-19 pandemic, and we want to welcome him, the Minister of State for External Affairs, Pabitra Margarita. We want to welcome him here in the House with us today. Thank you. You may proceed, Honourable Member.
Mr. Chair, and I want to personally extend our welcome as well. The other question, very, very happy with what we're looking at with the MSME sector and looking to deal with the critical things that really hold them back. But one of the areas that I've always been concerned about is the area of services. Barbados, whenever we've done studies, it has been noted that we have a potential competitive advantage in services. And therefore, it would seem to me that making more investments in the services industries will be helpful in helping us to broaden from just tourism and financial services, but to be able to pursue other services that can grow because we have people with skills and knowledge, etc. So I want to ask the question. I believe that you mentioned earlier that there's going to be some provision. What I wanted to know is, can you share with us what specific plans for assisting and growing the services sector we can look forward to in this year so that we can see that the services industries can really grow and earn?
So thank you, Honourable Member and Chairman. I'm going to answer the question in two ways. One, there is a dedicated agency in the business support community called the Barbados Coalition of Service Industries. I happen to know the institution quite well. And we have this year, in our estimates of expenditure, increased our allocation to the BCSI so that we can have that institutional strengthening. We have historically, over many years, looked at the question of services across the government in a very disaggregated way. And so you have had the international business unit of this ministry, which looked at financial services specifically, but did not necessarily have an orientation for services more broadly. Then you had the Division of Foreign Trade within the Ministry of Foreign Trade that looked at the export of services. At some point in time in the past, there was a services unit within the BIDC Export Barbados space, and that has evolved. And so we took a determination during the course of this year to do two things. One, since the global supply chain, the UNCTAD Supply Chain Forum in Barbados, we have seen that the international community has moved away from measuring and treating to services as a standalone sector, but a part of the global value and supply chains. And so we have looked at how Barbados can be integrated into those value and those supply chains, and then what are the domestic requirements of services to be able to make that effective. To that end, Chairman, the institutional strengthening for the BCSI is meant to allow for that dedicated focus for the first time now to have government financially supporting BCSI to anchor the services development agenda in the country. So this year, we will see the development of a national services development strategy that is meant to be led by the BCSI with that institutional support. They're also supporting the development of the professional services in a number of areas. There's work that has already started with the Ministry with responsibility for planning, with the construction professionals as well. There's a body of work also on standards in the professions. That body of work is ongoing. And we also are, during the course of this year, specifically under the umbrella of the registration of service providers and the movement of service providers in the CSME, that work is going to be anchored with the BCSI and the Business Barbados agency. So this year, we're going to be moving into that policy development and that execution framework that I have just outlined.
And last question, staying with services, the online presence gives us the capacity to deliver services in a more seamless way without having to move. And I want to know what is going to be done to assist our service providers and, yes, our manufacturers as well, to be able to promote what they're doing online and the possibility of having an e-commerce platform that can help with the settlement of payments and so on. If we could make that happen, the Barbadian economy would boom in a terrific way, because you would be releasing the potential of thousands of MSMEs across the CSME space and beyond.
Thank you, Honourable Member. And Chair, I think, you can't divorce one side of the work from another, right? And that's why the question that's been asked by the Honourable Member is so important. The work being done by Fund Access, by Trust Loans, by the Small Business Development Unit, but that's also linked with the work being done by the Department of Commerce and Consumer Affairs, because I know earlier we talked about the fact that we're the Ministry of Energy and the Ministry of Business, But we also are the Ministry of Consumer Affairs, so we anchor those things all together. And during the course of this year, one of the things that we're quite proud of, and I'm going to ask Mr. Bertram Johnson to get ready to speak, we launched a platform which is called Price Check, which focus on making available to Barbadians prices wherever they were. You can go online and you could be able to put together your items. But we've also been engaging with the Small Business Association to use that existing platform and that technology to have a dedicated directory of all small businesses in country that they have already been working with, to have them onboarded on this platform where Barbadians and others alike are able to go and they can see where small businesses are selling goods in what area, and they can purchase those goods in that space. What we've also sought to do during the course of this last financial year, and we will be following through on it this year, is the payment portal, and that will be done in collaboration with the Barbados Revenue Authority and with the technology service providers. So we are very much looking at moving into that space and that dedicated capability, not just for the CSME, but globally. But a part of that has also been the work of fund access and trust loans. So how many times have we gone to a pop-up? Or we've gone to a small business pop-up and we see an item, we like an item, we buy an item, but we can't find it afterwards. Or visitors who are coming as tourists to the country, they come to the country, they go to a market, they buy an item, but they go back and they love the item, but they can't find it ever again. That platform is really meant to ensure that you're able to have not just one-time sales, but repeated sales and repeated access to small businesses and their products and their goods and services.
Thank you. Bertram Johnson, Director of Commerce and Consumer Affairs. Good afternoon, Chair. Good afternoon, Ministers. Good afternoon, colleagues. It is indeed a privilege to speak this afternoon on Price Check. I just want to say that Price Check got its genesis basically from monitoring the compact program in which government would have said when we was going through a period of uncertainty due to global inflated prices. And out of that, we thought that we would advance government's trust in terms of digitizing services to the public. How do we digitize our services from the Department of Commerce? And hence Price Check was birthed. Price Check is a web-based application which allows us to seamlessly share to the public on a platform called pricecheck.gov.bb the information of the movement of prices every 2 weeks or every month that we capture on 47 essential items, or even on the broader basket, which captures over 300 products. We thought that that intervention would be useful because it gives the citizens and people of Barbados the opportunity to monitor prices across the platform of retail supermarkets in which we monitor via the Miscellaneous Control Act, in which we have provisions to do such. To date, that has been a tremendous success, as the Minister has stated. To date, my data is showing me personally that we had over 80,000 visitors and 713,000 hits within four months. That's a necessary condition, but it's not a sufficient condition, as the economists will say. And what we sought to do is, how can the Minister say, in terms of your question, Minister, on board of the services, we are working assiduously with the Heart and Stroke Foundation. We can all agree that the the NCDs is something that affects everyone. And how do we work with them to onboard even promoting healthier choices and monitoring the prices of healthier choices on Price Check platform. We are also working with the Small Business Association, as the Minister said, to onboard the online registry of small businesses that you can go to one space and have all that information on a digitized platform of all the small businesses. We are also in consultation with the Trust Loan. We believe that we have many small businesses in Barbados that are doing tremendous job, and we would have saw that through COVID. And how do you promote those persons to make them more effective as entrepreneurs and internationalize them personally, because anyone over the globe now can see their profiles. Price Check now have developed also, and we'll be launching that hopefully next week, a small business page where when you go on to Price Check, there will be a small business page that you will see small businesses and the content and what they're proposing to sell on a digitized platform that anyone using your tablets, your computers can see and have access to that. We think that this is a great move as we try to work with our consumers. But beyond that, Minister, we're also working with our retailers. We believe the way that we capture data now, where our inspectors go around and collect data at supermarket has become anachronistic. I think that's the new modern word that they use. So we're looking now to have point of sale information, where we will have the POS information speaking to price check, and automatically that be updated. And that speaks to the power of digitization, as the minister is urging us to move towards, which yields to the efficacy and the efficiency and timeliness of providing data to the public. So I will rest there, and if there's any further questions, I will come back. Thank you.
Thank you so much, and let me heartily congratulate you on over 80,000 people checking on Price Check. That is success indeed, and all of this will help to transform Barbados and the Barbadian economy. Thank you, Minister.
Honourable Member for St. John.
Thank you, Chair. 3 youth-related questions. Minister, you mentioned just now in relation to the MESE. My question is, note that I have the Youth Entrepreneurship Scheme within my ministry, but in relation to scale, how is it possible for, Sandra, the mic off? How is it possible for my ministry to engage with yours in relation to working with some of those youngsters who were coming through Project Dawn, 41 businesses? How can we work together to impact that particular grouping?
Thank you, Honourable Member. It's actually very easy to do. I believe the Honourable Deputy Prime Minister has already shown the way forward in that regard. And so with the entrepreneurs who are coming forward now with the road maintenance program, those persons have very much been integrated with the ministry's teams to be able to support the development of how to start a business, how to grow a business. They've had the benefit of the financial literacy program. Under the Ministry of Youth, Community Affairs and Sport, we have not just the YES, but also the Barbados Youth Business Trust, and they also work relatively closely with the ministry, but we are quite amenable to even deeper collaboration between the Fund Access and the Trust Loans Program to be able to build out an even more coherent development to supporting the persons coming out of Project Dawn. I believe the graduation saw a large number of young people interested in coming into business, and certainly with the allocation of financial resources to both Fund Access and Trust Loans in these estimates of expenditure this year, we want to be able to see even more of your graduates, and I want to take the minute to congratulate you on the successful closure of the first phase of that program and the graduation that you held just a few weeks ago.
Thank you, Minister. At least one member in the chamber would be aware that ministries collaborate. My second question to you is in relation to your financial literacy program. There you go, synergies. I'm getting the feedback, I'm not sure why. Minister, the other question is related to financial literacy. You mentioned at the beginning that you were in the primary school and in secondary school. My target population is totally different. Now, I have a digital media program at the ministry, and what I'm hoping for, if possible, is to get the information to my particular target group through WhatsApp. So is it possible that I can have that synergy again between my ministry and yours, where I can have my digital team prepare some small bite-sized videos that I can then send to my target population in relation to financial literacy? Now, I just had, as you just mentioned, and thank you, in excess of 200 individuals graduating from Project Dawn. There's another 250 plus right now at SJPI. but I need to be able to empower them in relation to financial literacy. It is not a case where I can have maybe all of them in a classroom for a kind of lecture setting, but if I can develop small videos with the digital media team, then I can push the information out not only to them, but to other young people in relation to financial literacy. Is it possible that you have, let's say, a set program that can be tweaked, or that we can have some of our own young people providing the information for them to then pass to our other youngsters?
Thank you, Honourable Member. Thank you, Chairman, for allowing me the opportunity to respond. The short answer is yes, absolutely. Since last year, we have actually onboarded under your ministry as well, in a further indication of synergies and collaboration among ministries, the Barbados Youth Advanced Corps in the financial literacy program. And so that has been one of the agencies under your ministry that has been onboarded and a part of the financial literacy program over the last year. And the expectation is that they will remain there. So there is expertise as we speak already in dealing with your demographic group, and we can commit. I'm going to ask the national coordinator for the financial literacy program, Mr. David Simpson, who also is chairman of Fund Access, if he can make his way down and then begin to follow on to answer the question. But in summary, while I spoke about the schools and the 55 schools that we have onboarded, we will be onboarded so far up to September of this year, we also have an online program that would allow you, Honourable Member, to be able to use the technology, whether it is on your phone or it is on the internet, on a given platform, to be able to have the benefit of financial literacy training for your Project Dawn recent graduates and upcoming graduates. But I'm going to ask Mr. David Simpson, who is the national coordinator, to continue on this point, please.
Thank you, Minister. Good afternoon, everyone. David Simpson, National Coordinator for the National Financial Literacy Program. To your point, Honourable Member, firstly, the digital content. We are actually currently collating and creating such content to highlight various tips and various skill sets, abilities, several different areas of content for financial education that once complete we can share with your team that you can also replicate. The aim is to take snippets of our online webinar program and other in-person interventions and create short video sequences that can then be utilized to share further information. So I think what you are requesting aligns with a particular project that we're currently building out with our social media coordinator. To Minister's last point, the online webinar component has two segments. There is the bi-monthly webinar, which is done via our Zoom platform and also live stream on Facebook. And that content is then uploaded to the program's YouTube page. Coincidentally, I am scheduled to do one of those sessions this evening. And we usually advertise these via the GIS platform or on social media. And we also are in the progress on an ongoing basis of sharing financial tips via the Nation newspaper and the Business Authority. And we are currently finalizing plans to have those shared on other media, for example, radio stations and other media outlets. The second component of this webinar program is a webinar training series, which will now, to the point earlier on the fund access and Minister's point about the synergies and so on. This program now gives certification. So there are 3 levels: beginner, introductory, intermediate, and advanced, that participants going through that program will have certification at the end, which they can take to present to Trust Fund or to Fund Access to say, I am certified, or my business is certified, having gone through this program, and therefore, I don't want to use the word preferential access, but these agencies will be able to have greater comfort in lending and advancing funds to these persons. The ministry also already has, through this program, a synergy with your program, with your ministry in terms of the national summer programs, which we held successfully last July, and we're currently planning for August of this year again, where components of financial literacy will be embedded into these national summer camp programs. As you may recall as well, Honourable Member, I have formed and forged a synergy between Fund Access and the National Financial Literacy Program and your ministry in relation to the I AM conference held every year, where we have sessions on financial literacy embedded in that conference. And from the Fund Access point of view, we had a successful pitch program last year for young people, and there are components of that which we are now finalizing in terms of the post-pitch process. We awarded prizes and so on, and now there's a training component that will be activated later this month. So I trust that answers your questions in terms of financial literacy, but also the greater synergy between financial literacy and the business component.
Just if I can, if I may, Mr. Chairman, I do want to take a moment, though, to celebrate the team. It has been a small team, again, just like everything else in this ministry, but they really, when I talked about starting out with 6 schools in particular and scaling up to 55 in the last year, that really has been driven by a team led by Mr. Corey Worrell, who has anchored that outreach, and a very small team around him, the online rollout and the overall management of the program. You just heard from the national coordinator, Mr. David Simpson. And so we're very proud of the rollout in the schools, very proud of the rollout in the National Summer Camp program under flight, very proud also of the Brown Bag series that we have had for public servants at lunchtime. You come, you get a brown bag, and we do financial literacy for public officials as well. And in the online component, we have the webinar series, further to close the loop in response to the Honourable Member's question. It contains the curriculum, it has lesson plans, there are templates, and various activities have been already completed, and they are ready for rollout with the Honourable Member's team and any other teams that are interested or want to be able to come on board.
Thank you, Minister. What Mr. Simpson said is important for me because, like I said, my particular demographic is a little outside the school system. So if I can have the WhatsApp where everybody is checking, then I think that we can impact some young people. My last question is in relation to jobs in the energy sector. Like I just mentioned, Project Dawn is wide in terms of its training. So I'm wondering if you can identify some areas that I should probably pay some attention to in terms of training up youngsters for that particular sector, because we know that the renewable energy trend is moving, and I'm not only talking here, but in the region. If we can do some training to get some youngsters up and running, I would love to know the areas that I can focus on that will provide some employment for some of my young people.
Thank you very much, Honourable Member. No, I must tell you that in the energy sector, we have a real challenge with skills in the emerging technologies. Our energy mix at 2016, at 2018, at 2021, and in 2024 has evolved. And we didn't have hydrogen, for example, in 2021. We added hydrogen in 2024. And so the skills in hydrogen don't presently exist. So immediately, that's one of the areas that I spoke about earlier in response to another member's question, where we have a program that we are now going to be looking at to roll out, to scale up the skills in that area. We also do not have a lot of expertise on island in the implementation of battery energy storage systems. That is a new area. In the same way that we had solar PV installers emerge as a small business segment in support of the energy transition, the expectation is that in these new technologies and in the emerging technologies that there will absolutely be a need for skills to be rolled out. This financial year, under the Smart Energy Fund, we have already developed in collaboration with the financiers of that program, the Inter-American Development Bank, the development of a dedicated training program that will be anchored in support of the Samuel Jackman Prescott Institute, the Barbados Community College, and the University of the West Indies, as well as a continuous training program, continuous professional training program for persons who are already working in the sector but want to have their skills scaled up, or they want to have additional skills in new and emerging areas. And those programs will be available to the demographics all across the country to be able to create opportunities for young people, middle-aged people, older people, but anyone who wants to be able to work in the energy sector, because ultimately, a big part of what we're doing in the energy sector vests itself in local participation. Having communities have the capacity to participate in the ownership of their own assets, our own sun, our own wind, the engagement in all of the emerging technologies, and we want to be able to have locals who are competent, not just business owners, but competent technologists who can themselves then service the energy transition agendas, not just locally, but globally, because Barbados is, in our mind, meant to be the hub for energy transitions and energy transition skills.
Thank you, Honourable Minister. Chair, I yield back.
Honourable Leader of Government Business.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I beg to move that you do not report progress to His Honour the Speaker and beg leave to sit again.
The question is that I do not report progress to His Honour the Speaker and beg for leave to sit again. All honourable members in favour, say aye. Honourable members against, say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Chairman has reported progress and requests leave to sit again. Honourable Leader of Government Business.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I beg to move the suspension of the House until 2:45 p.m.
Question is that this Honourable Chamber be suspended until 2:45 p.m. All those honourable members in favour, please say aye. Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it. This Honourable Chamber stands suspended until 2:45 p.m.